it's Em. I have finished my first book of the year, which I started reading last year, and that is Destroy This House by Amanda Uhle. I looked up the pronunciation. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. If I'm wrong, sorry. This is a book that I happened upon in a bookstore in Washington, D.C. called Politics and Prose. I was visiting my son while he was in college, and he said, "Oh, I want to take you to my favorite bookstore," and we were browsing. It's a fabulous bookstore, and I was looking for Awake by Jen Hatmaker. They didn't have that, but then I saw this, and I read the flap, and it sounded interesting to me. This is a memoir, I guess. It's Amanda Uhle is recounting her childhood with some, I don't want to say eccentric parents, but parents with interesting qualities. And now that they've passed away, she kind of goes back and wants to re-examine the stories they told, some of the lifestyle choices they made, and use also newspaper records and other forms of documentation to figure out what was really going on in some cases. I related a lot to this, not only because we're of a similar age, but because her father eventually became a pastor. My mother was a youth pastor when I was young and got ordained when I went away to college. Her mother was a hoarder. My father tends to, we used to call him a pack rat, not to the extent that Yule's mother was, but the descriptions, the claustrophobic descriptions of just the piles of stuff and the food rotting because her mom just was a serial shopper and just couldn't not buy things, and then the financial issues, and that also brought home to me some things because when I was a kid, we were lower middle class. She talks at one point about having to go to the food pantry, and some of the food is from the government and is in these white boxes with these plain black labels. And I remember having food like that, like a white box that just said cookies on it, like there was a point in time when that was also what we were doing. I was pretty young. By the time I was in further into elementary school, we had food that had pictures on the labels, I guess. But I do have a distinct memory of a time when a lot of our food was just in plain white boxes. So she talks about how her parents kind of gamed the system financially, just weren't filing taxes, weren't paying bills. My parents paid bills and stuff, but I got an allowance. My parents took me to open a checking account when I was still pretty young. And I was putting away money, allowance money, holiday money, birthday money. And, I had socked away up to like $300. I was like 9 or 10. That's a lot of money for a little kid. I wasn't saving up for anything in particular. It was more like, the potential was there for, I don't know, something. And at one point, my parents came to me and asked me if they could withdraw my money because they needed it. I think one of my parents needed like a dental procedure or something. And it was like, we'll pay you back, someday. And of course they didn't. And that, sticks in my brain. And this is the kind of thing that was happening to Amanda Uhle. Her maiden name is Long, so she was Amanda Long until she was married. Yeah, so I guess there was a lot of interlacing in my mind of things that I had experienced, not to the extent that she has. Both my parents are still alive now. I am an only child, though, so I feel the pressure that she felt to... you're going to be the one they lean on, or they expect a certain amount of things for, because Amanda has a younger brother, Adam, She doesn't go into a whole lot about him, I assume because he didn't maybe want... She says in the acknowledgments that he did help her with some things, some memories. Sometimes their memories are a little bit different over things, obviously. He's like 5 years younger than her, so the experiences he was having at the same time were a little bit through a different lens. Also, there was some gendered stuff in the family, with the religious aspects and everything. So it did fall to her in large part because she was living closer to her parents, because she was the oldest, because she was the daughter. Her brother was helping as he could, but he was also not having as much demanded from him, from what I can tell. But also she's telling her story. She's not telling his story. His story might be that they were making other kinds of demands of him. Who knows? They may have been emailing him for money or something. She doesn't really go into it. But yeah, I gave it 4.5 stars because it's a very interesting read. And I mean, it's hard to rate someone's life story, but I'm really rating the way it's written and presented. It was well written and arranged chronologically and in a way that kept things going. At the end, when she talks about her parents being ill, there's less detail, and she mentions that to some extent she doesn't even remember as much of that. It's all kind of a blur, which I guess I understand, but after so many chapters of more intricate detail, the end felt a little rushed and a little mushy, for lack of a better word, a little more vague. And I don't know, again, how much of that is she just didn't want to go into details about her married life. I mean, she mentions her stepdaughter and her husband and, things like that a bit. Sounds like her natural daughter was born the same year as my youngest child, so we have that in common too. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, this might still be a 5-star read for me, because it's something that is going to stick with me for quite a while, I think. I recommend it. I do. It was something I happened upon, so maybe my expectations just weren't that high, and so I was easy to please, maybe, but also maybe it's that I just felt like I had things in common. I don't think you have to have things in common to find this interesting. I don't want to say enjoyable, because like I said, there's some claustrophobic stuff, there's some anxiety stuff. She does get her anxiety across very well. I mean, I was feeling it. For me, my tolerance for mess is higher, I think, than my husband's. Probably because I grew up with a certain amount of it, but also because I was the person who had to clean the house as a kid, and now I'm willing to let things go a little longer because I have an extreme dislike of having to clean the house after being basically a Cinderella most of my life. So at the same time, there is a point where it does get, like, even I can't stand. I'm like, no, I've got to clean. I've got to put things away. I can't stand things just being out and laying around. At least if there's order to it. I certainly can't stand the thought of just leaving food out to rot with maggots, things like that. So be prepared for that if you do read this book, because some of the choices are truly, to the average person, I think, bizarre. But to be fair, when my husband first visited my parents' house when we were just engaged, my parents grill a lot. They live in Texas. They grill meat a lot. And I grew up where, it's all served on a platter, and people take what they want and they eat what they want, and then the platter goes in the fridge. And there's not a Tupperware, there's not foil or saran wrap over it. It just goes in the fridge, and my husband and I now joke about the fridge sausage, because he just opened the fridge one day and there's just a plate of just sausage sitting in the refrigerator. No covering, no nothing. And he was just like, what? And I was like, is that not normal? Do people not normally do that? Because we've always done that. But of course, my parents also used the crisper for miniature candy bars. We didn't eat vegetables. We ate a few, frozen and sometimes canned. but we never ate fresh vegetables when I was a kid. So the vegetable drawer, it was always filled with like candy or, whatever. So, so yeah, quirky, right? I don't know. I guess every family has stuff. And if you just don't know that it's not normal, you might sense that there are things that are not typical. Like you're like, I get the feeling some of this is not the way people do things. But her family also didn't allow people over. Now, my mom wanted me to invite people over, but I didn't want people over because I also had just the sense that it's kind of weird and I didn't want people in my space. I was happy to play outside. I was happy to go to other people's houses. I had sleepovers occasionally, but more often I slept over at other people's houses because it was just, I don't know, there was something weird about it. This turned into more about me than the book. But yes, Destroy This House. I enjoyed it. Again, maybe it's because I identified with it a bit, but I don't think you have to have that connection or those connections to find the story engaging, I guess. 4.5 stars, potentially 5 stars. The more I think about it, I might adjust that rating. The more I think about it, I'm like, yeah, it is going to stick with me. And to me, that's a sign of a really good book. That's a 5-star read. Just that little bit at the end where it just felt a little bit rushed and indistinct pulled it back a bit for me. It's not too long. It's 336 pages. It was a fairly quick read. Like I said, well organized, well written. I have picked up The Tainted Cup because a lot of people have recommended that book. I don't typically read high fantasy. I did not realize when I picked it up that this is pretty high. I mean, it's got a map and it's got charts. And my husband looked at it and said, oh, that's not your usual thing. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. But I mean, I'm 30 pages in. It was a rocky start. There's a lot thrown at you. And it's not that I can't follow and understand. It's more like, do I want to do this amount of work for this story? Because so far, like the main character, the narrating character, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this guy. But the more I got into it, the more intrigued I became. So I'll probably stick with it for at least a little bit more. And we'll see if I get really kind of sucked in or not. Because my husband's like, well, if you don't want to read it, I'll read it. So I may hand it off to him if I don't get there with it. But yeah, so that is the next thing on my reading list at the moment. And yeah, until next time, take care.